The landscape of modern conflict has fundamentally transformed, with traditional military operations increasingly supplemented or replaced by sophisticated hybrid warfare tactics that blur the lines between war and peace. Since the escalation of tensions following Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, Europe has witnessed an unprecedented surge in hybrid operations targeting its critical infrastructure, democratic institutions, and social cohesion. These operations, spanning from cyberattacks on power grids to coordinated disinformation campaigns, represent a deliberate strategy to destabilize Western societies without triggering the collective defense mechanisms of conventional warfare. The evolution of hybrid warfare doctrine. Hybrid warfare, as practiced by Russia in the contemporary European theater, represents a sophisticated evolution of military thinking that combines conventional and unconventional methods to achieve strategic objectives while maintaining plausible deniability. This approach draws from decades of Soviet-era active measures and information warfare doctrine, adapted for the digital age and refined through practical application in conflicts ranging from Georgia in 2008 to the ongoing operations across Europe. The fundamental premise underlying this strategy recognizes that modern society's dependence on interconnected digital infrastructure and information ecosystems creates vulnerabilities that can be exploited more effectively and economically than through traditional military means. The theoretical foundations of Russia's hybrid warfare approach can be traced to the writings of military theorists like Valery Gerasimov, whose articulation of nonlinear warfare emphasized the importance of achieving political and strategic goals through the integrated use of military and non-military instruments. This doctrine views the information space as a primary battlefield where perception management and narrative control can achieve effects comparable to or exceeding those of kinetic operations. The approach particularly emphasizes targeting an adversary's critical vulnerabilities, including energy infrastructure, telecommunications networks, financial systems, and the social fabric that binds democratic societies together. What distinguishes the post-2022 phase of Russian hybrid operations is both their intensity and their geographic scope. While previous campaigns often focused on specific targets or limited geographic areas, the current wave of operations demonstrates a coordinated, continent-wide effort to undermine European unity and resolve. This escalation reflects both strategic necessity, as Russia seeks to weaken Western support for Ukraine, and opportunity, as the fog of ongoing conflict provides cover for operations that might otherwise provoke stronger responses. The cyber domain as a primary battlefield. The digital realm has emerged as perhaps the most active front in Russia's hybrid campaign against European infrastructure. Cyber operations offer numerous advantages for hybrid warfare practitioners, including the ability to strike across vast distances instantaneously, the difficulty of attribution, and the potential for cascading effects that amplify the impact of initial attacks. Since 2022, European cybersecurity agencies have documented a marked increase in both the frequency and sophistication of cyber operations targeting critical infrastructure sectors, with energy, transportation, healthcare, and government services bearing the brunt of these attacks. The targeting of energy infrastructure has proven particularly effective in demonstrating the vulnerability of modern societies to hybrid threats. Attacks on power generation facilities, electrical grid control systems, and oil and gas pipelines have ranged from reconnaissance and data theft to attempted sabotage of operational technology. These operations often employ advanced persistent threat techniques, establishing long-term presence in target networks to gather intelligence and position themselves for future disruptive actions. The psychological impact of these attacks often exceeds their immediate physical effects, as citizens and businesses lose confidence in the reliability of essential services. The healthcare sector has faced an especially pernicious form of cyber aggression, with ransomware attacks disrupting hospital operations and endangering patient care. These attacks exploit the sector's reliance on legacy systems, limited cybersecurity resources, and the life-critical nature of medical services that makes organizations more likely to pay ransoms. The timing of many attacks, coinciding with periods of heightened tension or significant political events, suggests coordination with broader strategic objectives rather than purely criminal motivations. Financial services and telecommunications networks have similarly found themselves in the crosshairs of sophisticated cyber operations. Distributed denial-of-service attacks aimed at banking platforms seek to undermine confidence in financial systems, while intrusions into telecommunications infrastructure enable both intelligence gathering and the potential for future disruption of communications during critical moments. The interconnected nature of these systems means that successful attacks can trigger cascading failures across multiple sectors, amplifying their impact far beyond the initial target. Physical sabotage and gray zone operations. While cyber operations capture headlines, physical sabotage of infrastructure has emerged as an equally concerning dimension of hybrid warfare. Since 2022, European security services have investigated numerous incidents of suspected sabotage targeting railways, undersea cables, pipelines, and industrial facilities. These operations occupy a gray zone between criminal activity and acts of war, complicating attribution and response while achieving strategic effects through the accumulation of seemingly isolated incidents. The vulnerability of undersea infrastructure has become particularly apparent, with several incidents involving damage to submarine cables and pipelines raising concerns about the security of critical connections that enable everything from internet communications to energy supplies. The investigation of these incidents reveals the challenges of protecting vast underwater networks that span thousands of kilometers across international waters. The ambiguity surrounding many incidents, where natural causes, accidents, and deliberate sabotage remain difficult to distinguish, exemplifies the advantages that hybrid warfare offers to those willing to operate in legal and ethical gray zones. Railway networks across Europe have experienced a series of suspicious incidents ranging from arson attacks and signal boxes to the deliberate obstruction of tracks. These operations appear designed not only to disrupt transportation, but also to demonstrate vulnerability and create a climate of insecurity. The targeting of railways carrying military supplies or supporting NATO operations suggests strategic selection rather than random acts of vandalism. The distributed nature of railway infrastructure makes comprehensive protection challenging, while the economic and social importance of rail transport amplifies the impact of even temporary disruptions. Industrial facilities, particularly those associated with defense production or critical supply chains, have reported increased suspicious activity, including unauthorized drone overflights, attempted intrusions, and unexplained technical failures. The difficulty of distinguishing between coincidence and coordination in these incidents exemplifies the attribution challenge that makes hybrid warfare attractive to its practitioners. Even when sabotage cannot be definitively proven, the mere suspicion of hostile activity forces increased security expenditures and operational modifications that impose costs on target societies. The information warfare dimension. Information operations constitute perhaps the most pervasive element of hybrid warfare, seeking to shape perceptions, polarize societies, and undermine trust in democratic institutions. The post-2022 period has witnessed an industrialization of disinformation production and distribution, with coordinated campaigns leveraging traditional media, social networks, and emerging platforms to flood the information space with misleading narratives. These operations exploit existing social divisions, amplify extreme voices, and seek to exhaust audiences with contradictory information that makes discerning truth increasingly difficult. The sophistication of contemporary disinformation campaigns extends far beyond crude propaganda, employing advanced understanding of cognitive psychology, social network dynamics, and algorithmic amplification. Artificial intelligence technologies enable the mass production of convincing fake content, including deepfake videos and synthetic media that challenge traditional methods of verification. The speed at which false narratives can spread through digital networks often outpaces fact-checking and official responses, allowing disinformation to shape public perception even when subsequently debunked. migration, and energy security have proven particularly fertile ground for disinformation campaigns seeking to exacerbate social tensions and political divisions. Fabricated stories about refugee crimes, manipulated statistics about energy prices, and false narratives about the causes and consequences of various crises serve to undermine social cohesion and political stability. These campaigns often adopt a fire hose of falsehood approach, overwhelming audiences with such volumes of misleading information that the effort required to refute false claims exceeds the capacity of traditional media and fact-checkers. The targeting of electoral processes represents a particularly concerning dimension of information warfare, with operations seeking to influence voter behavior, delegitimize results, and undermine faith in democratic institutions. These efforts combine hack and leak operations, strategic release of genuine and fabricated compromising materials, and coordinated social media campaigns to shape electoral outcomes, or failing that, to ensure that results are contested and divisive. The long-term corrosive effect on democratic norms and institutions may ultimately prove more damaging than any immediate electoral impact. Defensive adaptations and resilience building. The escalation of hybrid threats has catalyzed significant adaptations in European defensive postures and resilience-building efforts. Governments across the continent have established new institutions dedicated to countering hybrid threats, enhanced information sharing mechanisms, and invested heavily in critical infrastructure protection. These efforts reflect growing recognition that traditional security frameworks designed for conventional military threats require fundamental reimagining to address the hybrid challenge. The European Union has emerged as a central coordinator of counter-hybrid efforts, establishing dedicated units for analyzing and responding to hybrid threats while facilitating information sharing among member states. The development of common frameworks for identifying and categorizing hybrid activities enables more effective collective response while respecting national sovereignty. Investment in strategic communication capabilities seeks to contest the information space more effectively, though democratic societies face inherent disadvantages in information warfare compared to authoritarian adversaries unconstrained by truth or ethical considerations. National governments have implemented various measures to enhance resilience against hybrid threats, from mandatory cybersecurity standards for critical infrastructure operators to enhanced vetting procedures for foreign investments in sensitive sectors. Many countries have established national cybersecurity centers that coordinate responses to cyber incidents while building partnerships with private sector operators of critical infrastructure. The recognition that most critical infrastructure operates in private hands has necessitated new models of public-private cooperation that balance security imperatives with commercial considerations. Civil society organizations have played an increasingly important role in building societal resilience against hybrid threats, particularly in the information domain. Fact-checking initiatives, media literacy programs, and citizen-led efforts to identify and counter disinformation demonstrate the potential for bottom-up resistance to information operations. However, these efforts face challenges of scale and sustainability when confronting well-resourced and persistent adversaries. The psychological toll on individuals and organizations engaged in countering disinformation, including harassment and threats, highlights the human cost of defending the information space. Strategic implications and future trajectories. The intensification of hybrid warfare against European infrastructure and democratic institutions carries profound implications for international security and the future of conflict. The demonstration that significant strategic effects can be achieved through hybrid means without triggering traditional military responses may encourage other actors to adopt similar approaches, potentially leading to a proliferation of hybrid threats. The erosion of clear distinctions between war and peace, combatants and civilians, and legitimate and illegitimate targets challenges existing legal frameworks and ethical norms governing conflict. The economic costs of defending against hybrid threats are substantial and growing, with investments in cybersecurity, infrastructure protection, and information operations consuming resources that might otherwise support economic development or social welfare. The indirect costs, including reduced efficiency from enhanced security measures, decreased trust in digital systems, and the psychological burden of constant vigilance may ultimately exceed direct security expenditures. The asymmetric nature of hybrid warfare, where attackers can impose disproportionate costs through relatively modest investments, raises questions about the long-term sustainability of current defensive approaches. The impact on democratic governance and social cohesion represents perhaps the most serious long-term consequence of sustained hybrid warfare. The erosion of shared truth, the polarization of societies, and the declining trust in institutions that result from persistent information operations threaten the foundations of democratic society. The temptation for democratic governments to adopt increasingly restrictive measures to counter hybrid threats risks undermining the very values and freedoms that distinguish democratic from authoritarian systems. Looking forward, the trajectory of hybrid warfare will likely be shaped by technological advancement, particularly in artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and biotechnology. These emerging technologies offer both new vulnerabilities to exploit and new capabilities for defense, though the advantage may initially favor offensive applications. The integration of artificial intelligence into both cyber operations and information warfare promises to dramatically increase the scale and sophistication of hybrid threats, potentially overwhelming current defensive capabilities. Conclusion: the intensification of Russian hybrid operations against European infrastructure and democratic institutions since 2022 represents a fundamental challenge to international security and the rules-based international order. The combination of cyber attacks, physical sabotage, and information operations demonstrates the evolution of conflict toward forms that exploit the vulnerabilities of modern interconnected societies while avoiding the clear thresholds that would trigger decisive responses. The success of these operations in imposing costs, creating uncertainty, and exacerbating divisions within target societies ensures their continued use and probable escalation. The response to hybrid threats requires not merely enhanced security measures, but fundamental adaptations in how societies conceptualize and organize their defense. Building resilience against hybrid warfare demands whole-of-society approaches that engage government, private sector, civil society, and individual citizens in collective defense. The challenge lies not only in developing technical capabilities to detect and respond to hybrid threats, but in maintaining democratic values and social cohesion under sustained assault. The outcome of this struggle will shape not only the immediate security of European societies, but the future nature of international conflict and the viability of democratic governance in an era of perpetual hybrid warfare. The experience of the post-2022 period offers valuable lessons about both the effectiveness of hybrid warfare and the requirements for defense. The demonstrated vulnerability of critical infrastructure, the power of information operations to shape perceptions, and the difficulty of attribution and response in gray zone conflicts highlight the need for continued adaptation and innovation. At the same time, the resilience shown by European societies in the face of sustained hybrid assault, the development of new defensive capabilities and frameworks, and the strengthening of international cooperation provide grounds for cautious optimism that democratic societies can effectively defend against hybrid threats while preserving their essential character and values.